So, good morning. I am really excited to be here today, and I'm excited to have my colleague Sean Stone with me. And the reason that we're talking today is that I encountered a situation the other day with some ninth grade African American boys that I run a community building uh, program with. It's called Small Groups, and we have lunch together once a week. And we had a meeting the other day, and we've been meeting for several times and working on our issues and our problems and our student achievement and things going on in the community and with friends and at home and with sports. And we were having a particularly normal day the other day, and everybody went around and they talked about their highs of their life and their lows of their life, and everything was just perfect. Everything seemed very normal. And about an hour and a half later, I found out that two of the boys, again, these are friends, a group of friends, got into a fight. Um, and I went and spoke with both of the boys. And I said to the one boy, what happened? And he said, he was looking at me and I had my earphones in and he said something to me. And I could see this anger just boiling up in this boy. And then when I went and spoke to the other boy, I said, what happened? And he said, I didn't do nothing. He started going after me and then he pushed me. And I said, but why couldn't you just walk away? I mean, why could you knew the consequences? Why couldn't you walk away? And his response to me was, that's not the way I was raised. And I at that point I felt almost like somebody had punched me in the heart because I realized that no matter what we did and no matter what we talked about, I didn't really understand what it was like to grow up in their community. And I didn't understand the feeling of being raised to fight when somebody disrespects me. And so, Sean, I called you because I wanted to see if you had a perspective. You did grow up in a community like that, and so I wanted to hear from you and what your thoughts are, and just some information I thought that I could share with other people, and how to look at this situation. What do you?
Yeah, well, yeah, as I said, thanks, Jill. It made me kind of remind myself of growing up. Obviously, you being not necessarily bullied, but, you part of a group, a small group of boys or girls or whatever, and you say things to one another, you go back and forth, and things happen. And obviously, your parents tell you, you have to stand up for yourself. If someone pushes you, you push them back. You don't take anything from anybody. You got to be really resilient, and confrontational if it happens to happen. So I can kind of understand what those boys kind of went through, particularly when someone pushes them or says something, and it kind of can escalate and get to a point in which it becomes a fight. And then the others around could potentially escalate it. Oh, you weak. Oh, you're not tough. You got to stand up for yourself. You're a punk in this sense. And so as a young man or woman growing up, sometimes, you have to stand up for things you believe in. But again, as you grow older and you understand the views and the differences that exist around maturity, and us as adults, parents, educators, and community leaders, in a sense, I mean, our role is to provide our kids with different skill sets to be able to handle situations. And I think, in particular, I come across one program that I was involved in, which is called the Rock and Water Course.
Wait, I'm sorry, I don't mean to interrupt you real quick.
Yeah.
Is that how you were raised? You were raised in Alabama.
Yes.
Were you raised that way that if someone touches you, you touch them back?
Well, yeah, if someone pushes you or says something, you stood up for yourself. And I'll give you one perfect example. I was very quiet. I was more focused on my sport, didn't really do much in terms of, being vocal and loud. I was always the quiet one. So in terms of a group setting, the quiet one could often be the person who you could often bully and get away with, because they're not going to really stand up and fight. I mean, not that I won't fight, but I was very quiet amongst my group and well liked amongst my peer group. Uh, I had one guy in my class who had been held back. So he was probably a year and a half older than I was, because I was the youngest in my age group in the class. And he was an older kid who was in a higher grade who had been held back. So he was older and bigger. And he'd always say things to me as a, through phys ed class and sport and stuff like that. He always said things, little subtle comments. And then he and his friends who were slightly older would laugh and do things. And so it got to a point in which it became a confrontation. And the same thing, he said something or pushed me or whatever, and I felt compelled to do something about it. And so he and I got into a fight in school. I'm not sure where the teacher was, but we got into a pushy match, shoving match, wrestling match in the middle of the floor, and off we went. I don't think anybody told the teacher in the sense, but I'm in my next period class, sitting down, taking my history, I think, or biology, whatever it was. And the coach came and got me out of class and asked me about this situation. He said, one of the students or someone said that you got into a fight with, this kid. And I want to know what happened, because, the school policy is that, no fighting, you'd be suspended and blah, blah, blah. And so anyway, I told him what had happened. We got into a fight, but it was the reasons why, because this kid, for weeks would continue to do things and, hide one of my shoes or grab my bag or something like that. I mean, and I didn't want to fight because I knew the repercussions was I wasn't going to be able to play basketball. I would have to go, there was things that I really felt important that it wasn't worth a fight. So I just kind of let it slide until it came to a point and escalated into which this kid challenged me physically because verbally wasn't working. And so we got into a fight, and he lost the fight, to be honest. He lost the fight, and the coach was quite happy that I did it to him, in a quiet kind of way, because this kid was a bully, but he had to still follow policy. So I was sent home, and, it became and my parents supported it. They're like, if he touched you, then by all means, he deserved it, so I didn't get in any trouble. But looking back now, if I would have had more skills, communication skills, to talk to coaches and teachers and other people around, it might not have been in that situation. And it reminded me of the course.
And so, I think in our lives, even in my life as an adult, I find myself in situations where people critique me or say things that aren't nice or not fair. And I want to hear more about this rock and water idea, because it gives me a way of thinking about what's important to me, because I do have very strong feelings about certain things.
Yeah.
And I do stand up for what I believe in. But sometimes I feel really angry or bad. But tell us a little bit about the rock and water.
Well, I mean, it came about. I mean, as I said, I spent 20 years in Australia, so I taught at some all boys schools. So in this all boys school, we do and use a lot of programs that focused on boys' education, and a lot of things that boys enjoy and are passionate and connected with is in the moment and physical. So all teaching has to have elements of physicality in it. We teach them how to use their strength. We teach year 5 about being able to be resilient. We teach them about banter, sledging, things like that. When, boys say things about, other boys about, you can't shoot that, you can't jump that, you're not as good as I am. So it's that bravado. And so all those things are, that as an educator of young men or boys, you understand those things. I played high school basketball, which is mainly, you're around all your boys all the time. I played professional basketball, played college basketball. I was in the U.S. Marine Corps, which is a boy, it was an all boys component. And so I know how important it is for that mateship, that camaraderie, and that companionship, when you're hanging with your boys. And so some of your boys can do things and say things that would challenges your manhood. Right. And so some of us, as we move through life, we aren't able to articulate things in which we really don't want to do, but we do it because we are amongst our peer set. And so this course, Rock and Water, gave our staff, men and women, boys, the ability to go and do things through the physical. And so we did things, for example, we do Chinese boxing, where you push and pull, so two boys could be face to face, standing still, toe to toe. And my job was to try to push you off your center and get you balanced, your core. And so we did things like that. And so the winner who actually would win was not always the strongest. So if I pushed you with sheer strength, then I could push you over. But me being weak, I can take your strength and move back with your force, and you'll fall forward. And so those things utilize the ability to move into the rock and the water. So the rock and the water is the push and the pull, the yin and the yang, the plus and the minus.
So what do you mean by rock and water? What is that?
Well, the rock and water is an abstract. It's an abstraction of reality of life. So a rock, in the sense for the boys, it is a rock. If you look at a rock in the physical sense, it has a definite shape. It can be structured in a box, a block, a cube, a pyramid, a trapezoid, anything. And so it's just a rock, but it's solid. It's very hard. It takes a lot to reshape a rock. It takes almost years of erosion, rain dropping, things like that to deteriorate your rock. And so when we talk about the rock as a person, when you are born, you have your rock, and your parents mold that rock into something. And over periods of time, they can build a very strong rock, your foundation, or some things can deteriorate your rock. Being ridiculed, being beaten, being abused, drugs, alcohol, those things deteriorate your rock as you go through life. It deteriorates your rock. And so your core isn't as strong as it needs to be. Sometimes, you give in. When the earth shakes for a weak rock, it crumbles. A certain amount of force to a rock, it breaks, it shatters and turns into sand. You follow what I'm saying?
Yeah, and our parents want us to be rocks. They want us to be strong. Rocks.
But not all of our parents understand the simplicity and the complication of building a rock, because some of our parents haven't had their rocks built. So they're building their rocks based on the rocks that they were given. So if for example, if you take the strongest rock that ever exists, could be a Mesozoic rock, for example, and then you take an igneous rock, which may not be as strong. Different types of rock. Some handle pressure, some doesn't. Some rocks just crumble under pressure. Some rocks crumble under heat. Some don't. And so everybody has a different level of rock, and we have our own levels of tolerance. So the rock and water course talks about how it builds the rock, and it helps us support our own rocks, and it helps us to identify our rocks. And then once that happens, then you shield it with your water.
Okay, what do you mean by that?
Well, the water is like, for example, if you take a rock and put it in the ocean, as the wave move across that rock years after years, it smooths that rock out. Let's take an analogy would be, let's take a vibrant young man who's, driven by hormones and physical and bravado and tough, and he, fights and challenges everybody at 13, 14, 15, 16, 17. Fast forward that rock to when he's 45 or 55 years old. He's got smoother edges. He's more refined. He's more, he's understanding that he has been smoothed by that water. And the water can be rough seas or it can be calm seas. But that rock is his life. That's his journey. That's his stream, his river stream as he moves through life. You follow what I mean? So it could be a stream or a lake or a pond or an ocean. It depends on where they've gone in their life.
Okay, so here's the thing. Now, you were telling me the other day, because when I was telling you about these two boys fighting, and you explained to me that they were both rocks.
Yes.
But you said sometimes rock means that you'll stand up for what you believe in. You'll stand up for who you are, but not all. Sometimes you have to be water. So what do you mean by sometimes you have to be water?
Well, you must always, your rock is your rock. It's hard to change your rock. It takes time. So my rock and your rock can be similar. So I believe that I'm going to stand up for my rights. I'm going to fight. And your rock is saying the same thing. And so now we're facing head to head and challenged by that rock. Right. Yeah. And so as a result of that, then we either are going to go into a confrontation where I'm going to push you, you push me, I push you, you push me. And that results in either a lose-lose situation, because I'm going to lose and sit home for 10 days. You're going to sit home for 10 days. We're in isolation. But was the matter resolved?